Hey everyone, it's Raghu back with Mindrolling, and say an old friend. Well, time passes quickly. We did meet. It's probably almost a couple of years ago. And Anu Gupta, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me back. It's so good to see you and be with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So Anu's done a lot of. It does a lot of different things. Certainly. Around technology, around diversity, around going inward is and finding who you really are in order to be somewhat of a radiant heart, as Ram Dass would put it,
Mm.
in our world. So, but let's. Where have you been? What you been doing? Let's catch up.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I think last we talked was perhaps towards the end of 2024. So my book, Breaking Bias, had just come out. So we were really talking about that. And actually, the paperback version of the book will come out very soon,
No.
actually next week in January. So that work continues. So I've just been going around the country as well as the world talking about the book and some of the things that I've talked about, that I write about in the book, particularly around how do we meet the polarization and the division in our time with compassion, kindness, and what I now call soul force, but also listening quite a bit because the challenges that, I see in our country, in the United States, are very similar to what people are facing, in the Middle East or in South Africa or parts of Latin America. And not just like broader in terms of politically or culturally, but also within our families. So I really feel
Mm.
like we're at a precipice of, what a lot of people call like, all the unskillful actions of the past, the causes and conditions that have been set in motion for the last couple of hundred years are beginning to bear fruit now. And what better time than now to really return to um, the ancient wisdoms that we've all been practicing, particularly, Ram Dass talked about from various wisdom traditions, but also to
Mm.
complement that with kind of the benefits of modernity, the benefits of technology. Um, yeah, so that's kind of what I've been doing. I've been I did do some incredible, awesome work in South Africa. I'm
Oh.
part of this global fellowship called the Atlantic Institute for Racial Equity. So there's about 20 of us from various parts of the world that are doing deep work around racial healing and anti-racism, particularly around Black people, from places like Tunisia to the UK to Germany to Colombia. And being in that community was really, I think, eye-opening in a way because
Mm.
even though intellectually I understand that all of our struggles are so similar, but being there, I'm like, oh my gosh, they totally are similar. And these boundaries, these borders that we've created are just such recent constructs. And part of what I'm feeling this moment is calling for is to remember how those borders were constructed and then begin to kind of push down those borders, but really starting from our hearts, you
Mm.
know?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Now, when we first met and talked, obviously technology was part of our conversation.
Hmm.
And service at that time, service space was what you had created quite some time ago, early, 2000, what, six, seven, eight, something like that?
Hmm.
That
No,
organization?
I think that's a different organization. I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I got
Yeah, I'm
that wrong.
like, yeah, I don't think I forget the name of the person who created it, but it's a really incredible organization that does a lot of service work and really encourages people to be service oriented.
Mm.
My work has really been around training professionals across sectors and contemplative tools, mindfulness-based tools
Mm.
to overcome division and to really offer healing.
Right. And yeah, well, let's just talk about it. Soul force. I like that
Yeah,
term, right?
yeah.
Um, yeah. What? I mean, you talk about it as cultivating the inner capacities required to alleviate suffering. Okay, that's pretty direct. But you also refer to, this came to you through Gandhi and Dr. King and and their whole purview and philosophy on all of this reality. So how did that play for you?
Yeah, it's such a beautiful question. So, this past year, due to some personal reasons, but also the just the exhaustion from everything that's happening politically, my business took a quite a big hit
Oh,
from just um, the political fallout around DEI, around civil liberties, human rights. So for me, it was at the same time an opportunity to go inward. So as I mentioned, I was traveling for the book, which was nice because it basically gave me an opportunity to be in community with so many people. But simultaneously, I deeply really strengthened my practice, my meditation practice. So I'm a student of Paramahansa Yogananda's in the Kriya Yoga tradition, as well
yeah.
as a Buddhist practitioner. So just kind of deepening into those texts, but also not forgetting the purpose, the passion that I have around human rights and social transformation and bridging divides. And the word that kept on coming up in my meditations was just the need for universal spiritual and ethical values. When we think about technology and its uses, of course, there are so many, but the energy with which it's being created and with which it's being deployed is oftentimes for the singular reason of grabbing our attention for the purpose of driving profits, regardless of the impacts it has on children, on adults, on making them more addicted to certain technologies, making them more reliant, as well as to be able to create these, what I would say unwholesome and quite harmful images, right? Like deep fakes, to
Mm.
really delude people further. So I think throughout this time, I was like, wow, like what's really missing is, what we call in the Buddhist tradition, like sila, ethics,
Yeah,
moral
morale,
virtues. And
morality.
and in the yoga tradition, these are the yamas or the niyamas,
Mm-hmm.
or the Ten Commandments. So it's like very simple and it's very basic, but that's like returning to that and really leading from that
Mm.
in most of what we need to do. And as I deepened into that inquiry all of last year, I was on a writing retreat for Asian American Buddhist writers at BCBS, and another beautiful retreat in Hawaii, sitting with some plant medicine. And what I kept on coming to was this idea of satyagraha, which is what Gandhiji started in India. I would say about 100 years ago, actually. So, in the 1920s, as a movement that was going to confront physical violence of colonial violence of the British in India with truth and love. So, satyagraha really means truth in action or love in action. And it's really rooted in ahimsa, or the first of the yamas and the niyamas, non-harming. And it was that idea that Dr. King then adapted and really became the backbone of the civil rights movement in the United
Mm.
States.
Yeah.
And for me, what they were really talking about, satyagraha or soul force, it's really a spiritual power that each and every one of us has as a human being, as a spirit in this bodysuit. And it's really the loving strength of will to confront injustice, to confront violence without mirroring it.
Mm.
And for me, it just feels like that is what we must reintegrate within ourselves, but also between ourselves, right? That soul force, to be able to see it with compassion, with kindness. And when we divert from it, to be able to call ourselves and others back onto that path. Um, and in the past, in the 20th century, the challenges were very different from what we're confronting right now. They were very much around physical violence. They were very much around, creating these systems that were hierarchical and that were marginalizing certain groups of people. While that still remains, right? Basically, looking around with what's happening with the ICE raids and so many other things in our country, there's also these quieter forms of algorithmic violence.
Yeah, that I wanted to really, really
Yeah,
zero in on because that's
yeah,
is. I mean, the other stuff is gross. It's just so
yeah,
gross.
totally.
But this, what you're speaking to, algorithmic. I mean, this is
Yeah,
subtly changing, deeply changing people, young people, and who are going to
it's
grow up,
it's changing
who have.
our our neurology, it's changing our physiology, it's changing our biology, it's changing how we relate to ourselves and one another. It's changing our sense of reality. We don't have a shared reality anymore because we're these companies that are constructing these alternative universes, virtual universes, are wanting us to inhabit these extra spaces. And ultimately what it's doing is that it's fragmenting our attention. And alongside, it's eroding the inherent dignity that's within ourselves by capturing it. And then it's numbing our capacity to care. It's numbing our capacity for what's deeply inherent within us. This idea of soul force, the authentic luminosity that we are, because it's keeping us in a place of doom and gloom, because it's taking advantage of our biology, right? But the beautiful thing is, for those of us who understand what's happening, for us to be able to see it for what it is and not get reactive around it. And that's really important, because that's kind of the role of soul force in the 21st century for me, and what a lot of the people that we look up to in the past did. When we think of Ram Dass, for example, right? He wasn't reacting to all the things that were happening by the scientific community that tried to outcast him. He was responding to them. He was engaging with them, right? And I think that is where, for me, that's the kind of the beauty of soul force. And for us to meet that type of algorithmic violence, moment by moment, day by day. And it's really about cultivating additional habits that really help us reclaim our attention and not give it away for basically commodification and profit seeking.
Well, one thing you just said, the phrase was something like dulling our ability to care. That is so insidiously apparent, And how do we, how do we even acknowledge that? How do we help people acknowledge that fact? Is a major thing. This is central to the kind of work that you're doing, no?
And it's a central part of my book, Breaking Bias, right? When I talk about breaking bias, that's just one way of looking at what we need to do right now. Is really what we're being called to do. It's like shifting our consciousness. It's really the evolution of human consciousness from this old paradigm to this new paradigm. Eckhart Tolle talks about this as creating a new earth, and it's really about us getting a hold of our attention and where we're placing it. And this is the most basic way that I can understand, and I write about this in the book, and something that I've learned from His Holiness the Dalai Lama is when we think about our humanity as human beings, and I came to this work of healing divides, after working in Myanmar and Malaysia and various other places, and then of course doing a lot of racial equity and justice work in the United States, and confronting hierarchies, human hierarchies, not just here but around the world. But I think being a student of Buddhism helped me realize that all of these labels that I put on this body, whether they're around race or gender or sexuality or spirituality or nationality, are secondary. These are secondary labels. These are our secondary identity. Our primary identity is our shared humanity. We're 99.9% identical. This is something we have, this shared dignity that we share, not just with other human beings, but with all of our non-human kin as well. And the beauty of this is that the Buddha gave us a pathway for this. He described our human existence, our primary identity, composed of the 5 aggregates. I don't know if you're familiar, but basically, body or form, Vedana, feeling tone, perception, and then mental formations, which are samskaras, these mental habits, and then vijnana, which is consciousness. This is our primary identity. It doesn't matter what gender we are, what color we are, what nationality we are, what our immigration status is. This is what makes up what we are. That's our primary identity as a human being. So in order to really address this algorithmic violence, right, these new challenges, we just return to that. Return to that primary identity. We have that map. We have a body. It feels things based on our 6 senses. And then it wears various rose-tinted, gray-tinted glasses through which it perceives the world. And then through that, we can begin to become more intimate with our habit patterns. The urge to click on an app, or the urge to read the news, or the urge to, go into doom and gloom. These are just habits that have been developed in the last couple of years, couple of decades. And then that's kind of all of that is being stored in our consciousness, our vijnana. The part of it is like, this is what we're bringing awareness to. And this is why for me, the practice of meditation and mindfulness is basically paramount in the 21st century, because what it's doing is it's helping us extract our attention from all of the noise and all of the ways we're being distracted by the outer world, and bringing it back to what is most essential, what is most profound, and what is most important, which is right here in our heart. And that's right here in our body. So we know what's under our control.
Yeah. Which is another whole thing. Control, our control,
Yeah.
It's interesting because we did a film on one of our mentors from back in the day, and Ram Dass's closest Indian brother named K.K. Shah. And we had filmed him before he passed. Actually, we're doing this podcast on the day, which is the 14th of January.
Oh, wow.
He left basically 6 years ago. He left 3 weeks after Ram Dass. When Ram Dass died, he told those of us that were in touch with him and close to him, I have no reason to be here. I was here to support Ram Dass. That's why I was here.
Wow.
And he said, so I have no other interest. Boom, gone. I mean,
Beautiful.
Pretty amazing. Anyhow, so we did this film about him. It's called Bridge of Grace. He was so important to us in terms of transmitting, not just, obviously he had been with Neem Karoli Baba since he was 7, but just we used to go to his house and the way in which we were treated as family, the way we were fed, all of it. It was a new paradigm for us in that moment. Anyhow, so this movie really speaks to that. But we also, when we were doing this filming, which was a number of years ago, we also, there was a retreat going on, and I took him to the retreat in an ashram in the foothills of the Himalaya. And people were interested because they knew of his knowledge and wisdom particularly around the Ramayana. And there's 2 major holy books for Hindu people, Ramayana and Gita.
Yeah.
But the Gita is part of the
Mahabharata.
Mahabharata, yeah. So they asked questions about all of that. And I'm only thinking of this because as you talked about the Buddhist concepts and precepts and so on, and the absolute, and I'm with you 100%, the importance of meditation and mindfulness to be able to know ourselves, to know where we're caught, to know where the self-interest is so extraordinary. So I'm completely there. But KK, he was talking about bhakti yoga, basically, the yoga
devotion,
of devotion.
Yeah.
And he said, so, and he also mentioned that Neem Karoli Baba used to say this as well. In the Kali Yuga, which seems like appropriate in terms of the age we're in, it seems right. The best and easiest way to merge with the divine, however you want to put that, is through the yoga of devotion, bhakti yoga.
Totally.
But he explained it out in ways that were, quite enlightening. Because people think, okay, you have a guru, so you're devoted to the guru, and you give up everything to the guru. All of this kind of external idea of what that might be. And he started with, the devotion starts with your parents. And he described that intimate relationship of child and parent, to the point where he said, before he would leave as a kid to go anywhere,
Yeah.
a student or whatever, his parents would bless him and bless the journey. So one day he must have been with Ram Dass and his father.
Mm.
He said, so, George, do you bless Richard? And George went, what? No, absolutely not. No concept of that. We do not in the West. Now, you are coming from the culture
Yeah.
that has that.
Yeah.
We don't. And I was with KK in this little piece that we did and
Oh,
said, we have no idea. So
yeah.
start there. I mean, this is very difficult for us. What I think I said in the piece, something
Mm.
Krishnadas repeats over and over. These people grew up with saints. We grew up with Mickey Mouse. What do you
It's true.
expect?
Wow, there's so much there, and thank you so much for bringing KK Shah into the circle. He's definitely like an ancestor to so many of us, and
Mm,
I didn't know about that story of him very consciously leaving his body because he felt like his work was done, and how beautiful
mm,
to actually
yeah,
know one's purpose in that way.
yeah.
So yeah, I feel a lot of gratitude for him. And I have yeah, like I think what you've said is so profound. And there's a couple of thoughts that come to mind as I'm reflecting on what you've shared. I think first of all, like, in the Hindu scriptures and the Eastern scriptures, in the Dharmic scriptures, I'll say there's various forms of yogas, right? There's of course bhakti yoga, and there's jnana yoga, which
Mm,
is really about wisdom and knowledge. There's raja yoga, which is really about meditation. There's karma yoga, which is about seva and service. Um, and kriya yoga, which is what I practice, which is kind of all of them together. So I think for me, all of these are pathways, and they're really complementary. And um, it's almost like when we're chanting, for example, we're like cultivating the bhavana, um, the feeling states of devotion. It's almost like a meditation, right? So it's like, I feel like for me, like they're not so segmented and compartmentalized, but they're actually like supporting one another. Like we need
mm,
wisdom to be able to practice devotion, and we need meditation to be able to be in service. So it's all kind of, it's part of the same infrastructure. But I
mm,
think our temperament is what one has to become, what we are asked to discover within ourselves, to see, well, which of these paths do I want to really commit to, and that I want to follow. So I think that's where I think that's kind of how I look at these practices. And for me, like meditation is a core part of it, which is why I'm like a proponent of it.
yeah.
um, but I think what's really exciting around what you shared, like on, well, what's happening in the West, right? Because I'm someone who's kind of like a hyphenated person. Like I
Mm,
was raised in the West, but I also spent my early childhood in the East, in India, and I was exposed to a lot of these traditions while I was there.
mm.
But also come from a family with a lot of intergenerational trauma, and
Oh,
mental health challenges, and
mm,
just deep wounding, right? Which is something that a lot of us around the world can understand. A lot of us are living in these times of modernity, like what some call deep stage capitalism, where a lot of that, what KK experienced with his family, it's so beautiful, but a lot of us can't relate to that,
yeah.
today.
That's what I
Uh,
said in
yeah,
the talk I
yeah,
did with him. Yeah.
yeah. And what's that about? Well, I think for me, and that's why it's been a gift to be brought to this work of breaking bias, and kind of, I started peeling the layer in terms of like the history of, well, where does it start from? Right? It's like for us, like sometimes we're in the West, we're just like, well, in the West, we're just like this, which we've always been like this. How it's like, actually, that's not true. And the more we peel the layer, the more we peel the onions, we begin to discover that what we're experiencing in the West, it's really a mindset of separation, you know?
Mm,
And this is what's known as, Maya in our traditions, right? Or Mara in the Buddhist tradition. But even, and that is what keeps us deluded. And that mindset of separation wasn't always the way of European cultures or even Abrahamic faiths in those cultures, but it became dominant after the Roman Empire, right? So of course there's a long legacy of that, but that's kind of where we are. So I think for me, the exciting aspect of this is to put those folks in the West, is for us to discover what's beyond that mindset of separation?
Mm.
Why is it so difficult for us to just be like, hey, I can bless anyone who comes by my doors, whether I like them or not, because they too share inherent dignity of existence. Like
Yeah.
we're part of this universe together. And every human being, regardless of how much I disagree with their actions and their behaviors and their speech, somewhere in there is a divine spark, because ultimately we're all part of this single consciousness, right? Which is what, the devotional practice of writing Ram Ram Ram, or, saying Ram 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 is really about, is to feel that merging with that ultimate source that gives life to everything.
He would say in this particular topic, devotion is about fully being with whatever it is. And he said, yes, of course, you do hatha yoga and meditation and pranayam and so on. All of that supports one's ability to open.
Totally.
And he said, but you can't do anything unless you are completely in the heart of that moment.
Absolutely. And I agree with him. And that's known as Shraddha, right? Or this confidence that we have. So in my tradition, in SRF, the Yogananda tradition, before we do any meditation, we first chant. Like we're basically invoking, the gods, God and gurus to be in our presence, right? Yeah. So we begin to feel that presence. It calms our nervous system, and then it also channels our attention towards this universal source, this universal intelligence that we're asking to commune with, right? To return to for that period of 30 minutes, 2 hours, 4 hours, whatever. And that's kind of how it operates. And I think what's happened in the West, which is, it's beautiful that you mentioned this question, is that I think the early practitioners who went to South Asia and East Asia, they tried to essentialize the practices.
What?
Essentialize the practices.
What do you mean by that?
What's most important? Let's just take the, what is the hack? We just need to do one thing and forget the rest. Everything else is ritual. Right. So they removed a lot of those devotional practices. They removed a lot of the ritualistic practices. And I know that I've spent a lot of time in Western Buddhist centers, on extended retreats, but it actually felt quite lonely just to sit in silence. And, more recently, in the last 5 to 8 years, they've introduced a lot of devotional practices. Oh, really? Chanting, bowing. And it's like, whoa, we're really bringing in those cultural aspects of what makes us human.
Right, well, the Tibetans, though, they've been...
Of course not, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that devotion to the guru is very much a part of who they are.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Totally. Yeah, I've been in the Theravada, the Western insight traditions, right. Well, Western insight tradition, yeah.
Yeah. And I say this, and I'll say it again for everybody, who's looking, for a meditation practice that is very practical and very effective, is insight meditation, the Theravada meditation that Sharon Salzberg and Joseph Goldstein and Jack Kornfield represent. It really had a big imprint in this country around these practices, And listen, we were with Neem Karoli Baba Maharaji. He never said a word to us about meditating. When I asked him about, okay, well, how should I meditate? I mean, I don't know if I've told this story a billion times, but he said, meditate like Christ. When he was nailed to the cross, he did not feel pain. He was lost in love with every sentient being. Which I just wanted a mantra, I was 24 years old or something, so he never, that was just, part of our mental projection about what we thought we should or shouldn't do.
Yeah.
But what happened? We all ended up, one way or the other, doing that practice.
Totally.
Vipassana. And it became a grounding, a way for us to really deal with the vicissitudes of our minds, which were running wild, half the time. So, yeah, everybody out there, Vipassana is a great, a formidable practice. And I, I think, again, we go back to KK, whatever it is that one engaged with has to be done with tremendous heart, focus, conversation, and conversation. And that's something we haven't even brought up, which is community.
Totally.
I mean, I think it's very difficult for us to change some of these habits without recognizing they're in all of us. You know, and satsang, which is what it's, or sangha for the Buddhists, is really a recipe that needs to be included in all of this. I believe.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And that's what's going to create the transformation in our society. It's, of course, it begins at the individual level, but we practice it in the collective. And the word satsang is such a beautiful word because it's really community of truth, right? Community rooted in
Yeah.
truth and satya. And there's something about being in community and practicing together that shifts our own. I mean, they've tested this, our own nervous system in terms of regulating what happens within and being able to shed what's not skillful and what's
Exactly.
unwholesome. And the other beautiful thing that scientists have now shown to work why Sangha is so important is it gives us an opportunity to have new models. So particularly as we're talking about the 21st century and just the ubiquity of technology, the devices on our hands, and as we are looking at a lot of influencers and politicians and celebrities doing X, Y, Z, we begin to think that that is the norm, right? Because that's what we are being exposed to day in and day out. But in Sangha, particularly in Satsanga, we become exposed to other ways of being, particularly when we have a teacher or a guru or a fellowship leader. And that creates possibilities. And I feel like for me, that's so important for young people in these days.
Yeah.
Because so many of our young people have become sucked into TikTok and Instagram. And so we need to give them new possibilities of being that are beyond what these companies are feeding them. So
No,
that's just an invitation to invite
Yeah.
more young people into our sanghas.
Yeah, well, that's a major. I mean, before Ram Dass left, he said to me,
Yeah.
as the director of the foundation, I said, what do we need to be doing, beyond your lifetime? And he said, absolutely making everything available to the next generation. That's number one. And, we've done as much as we can, and we continue to do, to bring people in, young, next generation into it. Very important.
Yeah.
Let me read something from this blog that you wrote, and this particular part of it's called "Bearing Witness Without Being Consumed," and everybody is being consumed right now. I mean, we are living through a period of profound transition, political instability, warmongering, ecological breakdown, and the unchecked acceleration of technology are not isolated events, and we should get into that a little bit. They have particular causes, and they're therefore consequences of deeper histories and habits. Unresolved legacies of extraction and exclusion, vast imbalances of global power, and a thing-driven, thing rather than people, or life-centered culture that has colonized our attention and daily choices. And you go on to talk about, we fear not knowing. This not knowing was a central practice of Roshi Bernie Glassman. I don't know.
That's right. I do know him, right? Yes.
Yeah. And we've been trained to believe that uncertainty is inherently dangerous, that only bad things happen when we are not in control. And that extends to the smallest little parts of our life. trying to, for me, we're in the middle of a move, and you got to change the electric thing and the gas. Oh God, what happened to the? I had the credentials right, and the control is lost, and suddenly I'm like,
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, uncertainty is inherently dangerous. We.
Yeah. And that's just training, right? I think for me, that has been the big insight coming out of this year of, deep reflection and contemplation, that uncertainty isn't inherently dangerous. This goes back to what we were talking about: trust, faith, shraddha. Like, we are not isolated and alone. Like, we have so much help from one another, from ourselves, from our guides, from our teachers. And to really cultivate strength and faith in that, confidence in that. And this fear mongering, this fear of uncertainty is actually leading us to suffer in the present moment. Right? And I think it's recognition of that. And I really feel like this is something that we have inherited, by particularly in the last couple of decades, with the acceleration of technology. But a lot, when I think about my childhood and some of the cultures that I was exposed to, of course, there was always like fear of not knowing, but there wasn't that clenched fist in wanting to control the future. It was almost like there was a levity with which people, at least the people that I was surrounded by, with which they lived life. They had their purpose, they had their jobs, they had their family obligations, they fulfilled them. And then we'll see what's going to happen. And, in our traditions, in the Eastern traditions, and as well as New Age traditions now, there's an understanding that our existence on this planet, on this plane, is actually a school. We are here to learn our lessons. We're part of the school of life. And every lesson that, we have yet to learn will keep on showing up.
Well,
until we learn that lesson, until we grow and we evolve. And so there is a higher intelligence, Some call it God, others call it source, some call it creator, whatever. It doesn't matter to me what we call it. But it's there. And it's operating within us, day in and day out. Is the reason why we breathe. It's why our heart is pumping blood. Like, all of this is an accident. Like, sometimes when I have, if I really go deep in contemplation and just reflect on how incredible my body is and how this is all happening, or, I have plants in my office and just how it was just a little bud and now it's like a fully fledged, I'll show you this bonsai tree. It began with a seed, and how it's crazy. It's amazing, right? And you just like think about this and you reflect on it. It's like, oh my God, there is a greater intelligence there, right? So this is what we're asked to do. And that there is inherent goodness in the universe. Yes, there are shadows, right? We're living in a world of duality. Light and shadow will always exist. So that's what we have to give up, that we can create a heaven on earth, or something, these fantastical ideas that we've been fed by our culture. Yeah. Because as the Buddha said, the first noble truth, there is suffering. That's the contract we signed when we came on this planet. Suffering will exist. You can have the most amount of wealth. You can have all of the fame, all of the followers, all the beautiful things, have all the sex you want, eat all the good food. You'll still suffer.
Right. Ram Dass had a out-of-body teacher at one time.
Oh, really? Who was that?
What was his name? Oh, God, I just lost it. But anyhow, he said to Ram Dass, and having a discussion just like we are having right now, and you already said it, and that's why it triggered me. Ram Dass, is a curriculum here. Life is a curriculum. Take the course.
That's right.
Stop fighting. In other words, stop fighting it, Recognize that everything that happens is perfectly designed to open up your eyes, your mind, your heart to one thing or another that you need in this lifetime. Take the curriculum. I always thought that was so great.
It's beautiful. It's beautifully said. Yeah. And we're taking this curriculum, like sometimes, some people are on in the first grade, others are in the fifth grade, others are in graduate school, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
Part of it is like we each have to live our journey and we each have to go through it. And there's no shame around it. That's what I love about this. But with that said, we have a choice. And that's kind of I've spent decades just like fighting with the universe for how it is and wanting it to be different.
Mm.
And, now at the age of 40, I'm like, oh, it's actually perfect just as it is.
Mm. That's so
It's
good.
really about accepting it. And then what can I do about it? Rooted once again, in those values, that bhavana, that devotion that we're trying to cultivate through our practice.
Yeah.
What is that asking of us? And each one of us has a different role to play.
Now, I'm sure there's people listening here, and I'm part of it too, and I can recognize it in myself. The overwhelm, and I love, you had a nice term, what passes for political discourse. I was going to say conversation. That's what I was trying to allude to before.
Yeah.
What kind of conversations are we having with each other? Even if it's not that person or that thing is not present, it's something that's reflecting off social media or whatever you're doing, and that causes, reactivity and fear and so on. So this is a large thing that's happening today, and you did refer to it. And I think you have a friend who described it as a demoralized shrug.
Yeah.
I love that. That is so absolutely describes what is going on for so many people.
I'll have to share this episode with her. That was you.
Yeah. Right. But, what are the first things that you can suggest? I mean, I have my ideas as well.
Yeah.
In terms of transforming that demoralized shrug in this moment. Very difficult. And I think it starts with, the idea of soul force. I do.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a nice term, but the reality of you can't look outside yourself. It's just not.
I think there's two things that are happening that we can do, and for me to cultivate soul force. One is I think we have to really root into our practice, whatever that may be, whether it's devotion, whether it's meditation, whether it's prayer, whether it's contemplation, whether it's whatever it is, whether it's a body-based practice, yoga, tai chi, you name it. And really not listen to the mind as much, but listen to our bodies and our hearts, how we feel while we're in it and after we're in it. Because I would say 99% of the time we feel relieved, we feel connected, we feel more present. So I think that's one thing that has to happen. For me, it's really about connecting with the deeper wisdom of the Gita and with the Dhammapada of the Bible and other places, right? That's where I find my source of inspiration. So that's like one thing, that piece that we have to root ourselves in, what we believe, it's not just believe what we know to be true, the truth force there. And, Gandhi was using Hindu principles and Dr. King was using Christian principles, but it was the same thing, right? Same thing, just different words, different language, different cosmologies.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And the other is, I think, in a way, I really feel like that the universe is gifting us with this opportunity of being triggered all of the time. Because every trigger is a lesson. Every trigger is a lesson around fear, around uncertainty, around lack of control, around wanting. And there's a simple practice. So one of my beloved teachers, he's a Burmese meditation teacher, meditation master, U Tejaniya. And he has a very simple practice of just observing, the continuity of mindfulness practice of where the mind is going. Is it wanting or not wanting? What is the defilement that's in the mind? Craving or aversion? That's it. And I think for me, that's been really helpful because I'm beginning to see that, this is coming up. And it doesn't need to be transformed. It doesn't, because the transformation will happen on its own. But what it needs at this moment is for it to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be accepted, and oftentimes to be felt. Because I think for me, as I move through the fear, as I move through the disgust, as I move through the anger, I let those feelings pass through me. Like, oh, they've just left and I'm still here. Well, what can I do? Yes, there are protests happening. Yes, what can I do? Well, I can write this. I can share this with my community, right? I could, offer, I can donate funds, I can organize, but there's no control there. It's all coming from a place, again, of soul force, for me, and that's what holds true for me. What do you think? What's been coming up for you around, what can we do around all this?
It's interesting. What comes up for me is Dalai Lama constantly talking about compassion and kindness,
That's right.
And you think, well, he's the Dalai Lama, so he can affect so many people because he's a living example of compassion, literally, which he, by the way, just points to his mother and says it's because she instilled that, because that's who she was. That's why you see me. This is how I got here. This isn't, aside from the beyond, which we have no idea about how he got there as a tulku. And he said, going into the future, if we have mothers that instill that compassion, the progeny, and it will make a huge difference in how in our world, totally.
Yeah.
And then he talks about kindness. And again, we each of us have an opportunity to be kind. And when you perform the act of kindness one way or the other, it reverberates, number one. And number two, you actually stop thinking about yourself in that moment of compassion or whatever it might be. You can't, because you're completely involved with what can I do for this person? Whatever, they're in pain, they need help with a package of groceries, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And I think that these small, kind acts are a great way to start. And by the way, I am completely with you on the reality of having to go in through meditation, mindfulness, and whatever practice. It doesn't matter. To be able to really acknowledge the place that you describe. We are all have a goodness to each one of us, and we need to relate with that, not to the shit we want to call ourselves most of the time. So I was at a little anecdote. I was at a retreat. We just did a retreat in Maui last month, and with Krishna Das, and we used to do it with Ram Das until he left, and we continue them. Jack Cornfield's there. It's a wonderful thing. And so sometimes, and she comes sometimes, Annie Lamott. Do you know who Annie is, by the way? The great writer.
I haven't met her though.
Yeah. Oh, she's a wonderful human. So we were going to do a session. I was going to do a session with her and Dale Borglum, actually, Ramda. And she said, look, we need to talk about this. I'd like to be a little bit prepared. And she knows I'm not really into much preparation for podcasting. It was a podcast that we were doing live or something. So we went and had breakfast, and we each brought over a plate of food and so on. And then I said something, oh, God, I forgot. I have to get the cup of tea or something. And she looked at me, and this may sound insane, okay, but I'm telling you it was real. I had a couple of pieces of toast on my plate, and I was leaving to go do whatever else I was going to do. And she looked up at me and she said, can I butter your toast? Because if you don't do it, it's not going to butter. It'll just, it won't be able to spread. It'll be stale. It'll be whatever.
Yeah.
I looked at her and I went, yeah, okay. And off I went. I came back, and there was my beautiful buttered and pieces of toast. I can tell you, and I told this in the to the assembled group of 400 people or whatever, this little story. It really meant so much to me that she would take that moment to do something as small and seemingly insignificant act. But to this day, I remember, and I can feel her inner compassion and kindness. I just think of it, and I think of her in a different way than I used to think of her. I mean, it was more maybe business and friendship, but not quite this way. So I think if we can do these things for each other, we really can.
Yeah. And it sounds to me like that it wasn't that she was like, I'm going to be compassionate now and I'm going to offer to, but it was just her way of being, right?
Yeah.
And this is kind of the invitation for me, is that what we're being asked to do is to really become aware and to really move into what we're being asked to transform into, these loving, caring humans that we are, and to really bring that out authentically. And for me, like, that's the framework that has been really helpful for me, that I talk a lot about in my book, is PRISM, right? These are the 5 tools. PRISM is an acronym for 5 tools that are rooted in Buddhist psychology, but social scientists have shown them to work in terms of transforming and changing our behavior. And really starts with M, which is mindfulness, awareness, and then moving to stereotype replacements or supplanting. So when we notice something unskillful, unwholesome in our heart, in our mind, any habit, we change it. Immediately we notice it and we transform it. No shame, blame, guilt. It's really about noticing and transforming. Then we move to curiosity, individuation. And then lastly, pro-social behaviors and perspective taking, which is exactly what you said, what His Holiness says, the cultivation of, these positive mental and emotional states.
Yeah.
Compassion, loving kindness, gratitude, joy, forgiveness. These are skills we can actually cultivate, which allows us to actually imagine, which is perspective taking. And we're being asked to imagine new worlds, because if those of us, particularly if we're inclined spiritually, if we don't imagine it, someone else is imagining it for us. Colonizing Mars, becoming an interior planet, which is fine. They're still going to do that. I'm not rejecting those visions, but we need alternative visions as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's AI.
That's right.
And
how can we use this technology, which is here, to actually benefit human beings versus using our attention to extract and erode.
Continues that paradigm. Yeah.
Exactly.
No, absolutely. In that sense, in terms of speaking to what's going on with AI, I mean, I have been with people when we were discussing it. We're at the foundation. It's very useful for us to be able to find the right talks of Ram Dass that fit a certain subject or keyword or whatever, all of that kind of very practical stuff. It's really great. And then we want to, we're going to bring it in to help people get more intimately involved with these courses that we do, and able to get much deeper into it. So it's got, really positive effect and negative. And I have seen people. So we talk about relationship. We talked about community, satsang, and the way in which it can enrich in us and really. This whole thing should be about, how do we transform the demoralized shrug here? That should be, the central piece. And there are people that, then we're talking about separation. You mentioned it before, which is a huge part of what's going on here. And people want relationship. And they start relating with an AI bot. And, there's been many examples, apparently. I mean, I've read about them, of people really, it being harmful, very harmful. in their lives.
Totally.
And look how we want that sense of inclusiveness, sense of at oneness, which of course psychedelics help with. But this is just is it not a tremendous example of how isolated many people feel?
Absolutely. And I think part of it is like, I think we've been trained to then pity and feel bad for these individuals who are working in such, who basically either marrying their chatbots or falling in love with them or using them as their best friend or companion. But this is a tragedy of the commons. It's not an individual person at fault. It's a systemic failure. And this is because we are living in a society where the family system is oftentimes broken down. The community system is broken down. People don't have basic access to resources. And we've been incredibly polarized and isolated, right, in our own bubbles. So this is where I think for me, I think we have to think, those of us who are capable of thinking about it from the individual lens, but also from a systemic lens, like what's happening, right, from a policy angle. And for those of us who care about this, we can, like Jonathan Haidt, for example, he's a scholar in this. He's been at the forefront of shifting policies around taking social media use out of schools, banning social media for folks under 16, 18. Many countries in Europe, including and Australia, have banned social media for children, for example.
Yeah.
So I think this is where the personal that we're experiencing, that we're witnessing, really needs to kind of a larger systemic social forces. And all of us have a role to play. If we're not the ones who are thinking about policy, that's okay. Do what we can on a day-to-day basis. For those of us who do think about that, that's what we're called to do. And for us to do that effectively, we have to really be that ourselves, which is the invitation of Soul Force.
Yeah, we do. That's very important. Yes. And that requires commitment to wanting to change. Yeah. And then something can happen when that commitment is there. And as K.K. Shah puts it, that love of that moment that is all-encompassing
totally
has to be there in whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, I trust that everyone who's watching or listening to this is part of that circle. Like, we are light workers, and that's why we are committed to our practice. That's why we're here. That's why we're here on this plane. Of course, we want to evolve ourselves, but we also want to be bridge builders. We want to offer healing. We're so service oriented. So I think that's where part of being in this satsang, in a way, helps us remember who we actually are. But yeah, there's a lot of people that are operating from the shadows. That's okay. We live in a world of duality. For me, it's like, I don't want to focus on the shadow. I want to focus on, well, what can I do to bring light to the shadow?
Yeah. Little acts of kindness, everybody. Start there, and then a little bit of self-inquiry might go a long
Absolutely.
way as well. It's so great to have you, Anu, and see you again. So wonderful. We're gonna, everybody. Anu and I had a wonderful podcast, about a year ago, a little more than that, around his book. And now it's going to be, there it is. Breaking Bias. Great book. And
the paperback version that's just come out.
There you go. So you'll be able to get that. It's even less expensive. And we'll have, links to that.
That'd be great. With the foreword from His Holiness. So the Holiness has actually provided a spiritual shield for the
book. And you know what? Why don't you... I was prompted to get back with you by this this blog, New Chapter, Soul Force for the 21st Century. How about sending over a link there, and we can, so people can read that particular thing, because it's wonderful. And
I'll share that with you.
Yeah,
just find me on Substack, Anu Gupta, NY, and really talking more and more about cultivating soul force.
Yeah,
to me,
it's a great catchword. Yeah, I like it. I'm glad we got together, Anu.
Likewise, and many more ahead.
Yes. All right, everyone. We'll see you next week on Mindrolling, and go to BeHereNowNetwork.com/mindrolling, and or just go to BeHereNowNetwork.com. And we've been talking about people like Sharon Salzberg and Joseph Goldstein and Jack Kornfield, who brought Vipassana to the West. We're not completely alone, but they were the main instigators of it, and some people that we have been in touch with for decades. Take advantage of them. They have podcasts on the Be Here Now Network.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we'll see you next time. Thanks for being here.
Thank you all. Take good care.
Bye-bye.